couple quick reminders. Remember, you have your journal entry due at the end of the week. I have all your grades are updated through now, which is really just your week 1 participation and your coaching philosophy, which everyone got 100 on because you all did quite well for that. Just as a reminder, the Zoom links that I'll post are probably always going to be the same. I just use my personal whatever Zoom link for this. But I will keep posting the Zoom links for each week. And then I'll also post the recordings at the end of the week. So remember, you can only access the recordings through the class announcements because I don't want to, share your information with the world. All right, so today I want to finish up on communication, and then we are going to get into our next kind of segment here, which is going to be how to keep score. So Nick, Elijah, do you all know how to keep a scorebook?
Yeah, for the most part. I've done it in college a little bit.
Okay. And have either of you, Nick especially, have you kept a pitching chart?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something you're pretty familiar with. I assume most pitchers, especially once you get to college, it's like almost just a prerequisite for just even being on the team. You have to make sure you can do a pitching chart. All right, so first thing I want to ask you all is what, in terms of communication, what do you think is really, most important about communication on a team, either as a coach or as a player?
Like a consistent message.
Okay, and from whose side?
Like the coaching side, just in general, you don't want to be telling your team like 3 or 4 different philosophies or 3 or 4 different things.
That's very true. When I was in my 5th year, not a whole lot of people liked our head coach. I personally didn't find him, anything wrong with him, but he was a guy that he was very straightforward with us that, look, you're going to work hard. And he didn't care if we won or lost. I mean, yeah, he wanted to win, but I think he was kind of using the Coach Carter perspective that if he just conditioned us into the ground, that we'd come out to be like, an awesome team. And that really was not the case. But one thing he was consistent with his entire approach. He never changed his approach. And it's one of those things that he was willing to ride or die by his philosophy. And, I got to give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, as a grad student, I was the oldest person on the team. So, I understood it. I got what he was trying to do. The freshmen and even some of the sophomores to an extent, especially like the redshirt sophomores, were much more resistant because I don't think they had been in a position before where they were forced to put in the amount of work that was expected out of them. I mean, when you look at a college baseball player's day, and Claire, I'm sure you're in the exact same position being, a college volleyball player. You don't just have, say, practice and that's it. Obviously you guys have classes and whatnot, but you look at all the other things that go into it. Things like, say, your conditioning or your weightlifting, you have study halls, you got team meetings, you have a whole lot of different responsibilities, especially at playing at a Division I level where, Nick and Claire are right now. If you're playing at those high levels of competition, essentially most of your days are kind of mapped out for you. Now, granted, when you're off season, yeah, you get a lot more leeway kind of thing. But as soon as you start really practicing and whatnot, and then definitely getting into the season, you're pretty much on a set schedule. And that does have its, good and bad things to it. If you can't adapt to that schedule, it's going to make life pretty difficult for you. But if you're able to really adapt to that schedule, it makes life super easy. So Claire and Nick, what about you two? What do you think about is most important about communication?
I'd say consistency and honesty.
Okay. One of the things we didn't really talk about is why players do what they do. You know, people in general are going to screw up, you know, regardless of age or occupation or, you know, whatever. You're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. One of the things that I notice a whole lot with many people I interact with, and again, it really doesn't matter the ages, when confronted with the question, why did you do this? Especially if it's something where it's a bad thing they did. What kind of response do you think I get way too often?
I don't know.
Yep. And that has got to be one of the most frustrating things to hear. As humans, we have this ingrained need for finality. That's why, like, say, if you, it's probably not the best example, but like if you break up with a significant other, or if a significant other more breaks up with you, you want to get closure on it, right? That's why when people, like, say, ghost you, it's such a hard hitting thing because you have no idea why. That's kind of the whole thing with the I don't know, because when you don't get an actual response, which is what that really is, then it's very hard to get an understanding for why something happened the way it did. I would argue that I don't know doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know, but more or less that they don't know how to articulate what it is or why they did it, or they just don't want to admit why they did it, kind of thing. So when you are communicating with players, it's important to get and establish that kind of honest feedback from both ends. You know, how many times would you ever talk to a coach and even just, like, say, off the court, ask them why they did something or why they had a coaching strategy this way or why they did X, why we're doing this as a team? And how many times have they told you, I don't know?
Not very many.
I can't ever think of an instance in my entire playing career from T-ball on that a coach has ever said they don't know why they're doing something. I mean, you may get a bad response, like a cop-out response, like, "Oh, this is the way we've always done it," or "This is the way I learned it." I mean, that's really a non-answer in and of itself, but at the same time, it at least tells you that they have some rationale for why they're doing something, right? It may not be a good one, arguably, but it's still a rationale. I don't know is the worst thing a coach could say. Because if a coach tells you, I don't know, and you're a player, what does that tell you about the coach?
Incompetent.
I mean, that's probably a good way to put it. If anything, that makes the team trust the coach less because the coach inherently is admitting they don't know why they're having you do something. Remember, we talked about the whole thing with, you know, time's your best or your biggest commodity or most important commodity. If you're wasting someone's time, you know, you are really, really doing them a disservice, and you're also really setting up yourself for like a bad relationship kind of thing. So that whole I don't know bit is a very difficult one to swallow. So as a coach, and even for you all right now as players, you need to be able to have a justification for what you do. And this also kind of leads into that whole bit about taking responsibility for your actions. Because even if you screwed up, like, I did it, I got caught, whatever, it at least shows that you're taking responsibility for yourself. Now, I mean, that may not be, you may still not get the best outcome in the world, but it's going to not be the worst outcome kind of thing. One of the things that you're taught in Six Sigma training, and Six Sigma and Lean Six Sigma is all about process improvement and waste reduction. It originally was developed to help with assembly lines. So especially like car assembly lines or any manufacturing assembly lines, to reduce errors in the assembly. Is that the major thing you should be conveying, especially if you screw up or you do something wrong, is that you want to move forward. That's the big note you want to be putting on. You want to learn from your mistakes and move forward. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten out of really kind of, sticky situations like with work over the last decade, really just by using that line. This is a learning opportunity and I'm going to grow and move forward from this. And especially if you convey that you want to move forward together, it just, like, for whatever reason, it just makes managers just, get the, I don't want to say anything that's like too inappropriate, but it makes managers like salivate. I swear that if you just say that. Now, that being said, I don't want to tell you lying is good or lying is okay, but a lot of times lying by omission is something that's like acceptable, especially in the business world, when it's something that would deter progress from happening. And you do get into more of a philosophical debate about what is right or wrong and about ethics and morals. But sometimes when you are lying by omission for, the greater good kind of thing, it can be a good thing. Like a specific example would be if you were trying to finish a project and you knew that at the end of it, or to get to a certain benchmark, you had to get approval from a certain department. But by waiting for approval, it's going to delay the continued development of your project. So one thing that can be done is you say submit for approval as you continue working on the project, which is not you're going out of order. You're proceeding with the project as though you already had approval, even when you don't. But at the same time, if you don't get it, or if you're waiting on approval, you have to stop your project altogether. This happens a lot with something like, say, research. So, and especially with grant writing. So when you write a grant, you're asking somebody to give you money to do research. And what they want to see is they want to see that you have not only a full proposal in place, but also that you have institutional review board acceptance of your project, or IRB acceptance of your project. Well, a lot of times you can't get IRB approval for a research project without funding, because you can't say, well, theoretically, this is what I would do. It's no, I'm going to do this because this is the funding I have in place. So you write your, say, IRB request with that language already in there, that you already have that, grant money in place, because that's going to give you the path of least resistance. There's little red tape then. So then you can present your proposal to the grant organization and present it as though you have that IRB report approval. Because even if, say, the grant gets denied, you just don't do the research. If you don't do the research, there's no problem. You can say you're going to go do whatever you want, but if I don't do it, nothing happens, kind of thing. Now, obviously, you can't say like you're going to go kill someone or something like that, but I don't think we're getting that extreme. But yeah, definitely long-winded way to say, Claire, that yes, honesty and it's a good thing there. Nick, what about you? What do you think is most important with your communication, either as a coach or as a player?
I wanted to say something based off of what you were just talking about.
Okay.
As far as like lying. I think that sometimes bending the truth is okay as a coach. Like if you have a player that's struggling with their confidence and they just had an outing that was just not the best, but it was okay. Sometimes you can tell them that they did well, and that way they can kind of use that confidence and carry that to the next one.
That's an excellent example there. My first year coaching, my number one pitcher, like this is when I was coaching 13-year-olds, my number one pitcher, like historically had a whole bunch of success. He was one of the best pitchers in the league. When you get to all-stars kind of thing, though, everyone's pretty much on an even playing field. Ironically, his sister was recruited by, I think, like UCLA, USC, University of Arizona, Tennessee, and I want to say like Florida, Ohio State, and Michigan, all starting her freshman year of high school. She made the under 16 Team USA, and then as of right now, she's actually on the real Team USA for softball. But she was absolutely unbelievable. Her senior year of high school, she threw like something like along the lines of 7 or 8 perfect games, like freaking ridiculous. I have never seen like that's like Jenny Finch like level of good that I've never seen before. But that aside, her brother was my number one pitcher, and he started out doing really well, especially against the lower level teams. And then as he got more challenged by more difficult teams, he had extreme control issues. Like it was a Rick Ankiel situation if I've ever seen one, meaning that he could not throw a strike to save his life, kind of thing. And it really culminated with him. We were trying to do an intentional walk. So the situation was, it was the bottom of the 7th, so last inning, and we were in a tied game, 2 outs with men on second and third. So we wanted to intentionally walk the next batter to get bases loaded so we can get an out at any base. And he throws a wild pitch on an intentional walk. So something where you literally just have to throw a ball to a catcher that you don't, like you're not pitching it really, you're just throwing it in there. And he threw it to the backstop, run scores, we lose the game. And I just instinctively like called him after I got home. And it turns out that like he wouldn't even get out of the car, like his parents' car kind of thing. He was so distraught. And by just even then, just telling him, that he's still my number one pitcher, that, bad things like that happen. And even just giving him that kind of encouragement that, if this is the worst thing that happens to you in your life, you're going to live a pretty darn good life kind of thing. It was something that I was told by his parents later on, how he wanted to just like quit the team until he heard that. So I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but it does really echo what Nick was saying there, that it's okay to tell players who are struggling that they're still doing well, or at least well enough, because that's going to take a whole lot of pressure off of them. The last thing you want to do as a player is have to press, right? If you know, like, okay, I'm in an 0 for 10 slump, like I haven't gotten a hit in my last 10 at bats, and no one says anything reassuring to you, what do you think your approach is going to be the next time you go to the plate?
I have to get a hit here.
Yeah. And I know, like, even when I've gone through spells of that, even just playing like summer ball and whatnot, especially when you get into, like, say, like playoffs and tournaments kind of thing, you're maybe playing 5, 6 games and that's it for a whole tournament. If you're starting off like 0 for 8, something like that, do you really think going up there and trying to like work the count to get a walk is something that's going to get the coach's attention to say, hey, this guy deserves to still play, kind of thing? I mean, I would go up there and say, if I don't hit this ball 350 feet down the left field line, then, I might as well just, start getting my tweezers to pick all those splinters out of my ass right now. And when you take that approach, that all or nothing approach, it tends to not work in your favor. So definitely, when you even give false hope kind of thing to players, it's actually kind of a good thing. Um, if you keep their confidence levels up, that does a whole heck of a lot for them, not only with their own personal reassurances, but it gets them a lot of times out of their own head. So yeah, that's definitely a great point to make there, Nick. Now, in what else in general would you say is important about the communication side of this?
Sometimes if you don't ever talk to certain players, you can make them think you don't like them. So
That's a great point.
like trying to show all of your players that you like all of them evenly.
I get it, and it's hard to stay like even keel or dispassionate sometimes. I mean, you get guys that interact with you a lot more, and of course you're going to have a closer bond to them. I mean, do you feel like you're closer to your pitching coach than you are to any of your other coaches?
Yeah.
And I would opine to say that it's because you interact with him much more closely, much more often. Um, and that's not a bad thing. It's what's kind of expected. You got to figure with a baseball roster, you got roundabout 50 or so players, maybe more if you have a bunch of red shirts. You can't be best friends with every single player. I mean, it's just impossible. When I get a class of, 50 people, I'm not going to lie, I don't know everyone's name. I mean, just straight up, don't know everyone's name. What's even worse is when I call someone the wrong name. That's when I feel really bad, because especially like if I think I know someone and it turns out that I was wrong the whole time. Yeah, that's a little embarrassing. But when you even just anecdotally keep up with somebody, like with a player, not even, like I said, not even like getting their life story, but you just even say hi to them kind of thing. Ask them how they're doing. Imagine how much that can do for you. I remember this was actually one of the points that was harped on me in high school, was that the coaches would always try to justify why they were like yelling at us kind of thing. And it was always, well, we're just yelling because we care. I was like, yes, that is definitely a very good approach to take. Let me start doing that with all of my relationships in life. I will start yelling at everyone just because I care about you. And they would always follow that up with, you should be really worried if we just stop talking to you, because that means that we've given up on you, kind of thing. So imagine putting that kind of seed of doubt in your mind. And then what happens if just by chance the coach doesn't speak to you for the day, just because you weren't either around him or you weren't, say, doing anything that needed, addressing or anything like that. Now imagine what kind of, how that can screw with your mind then if the coach isn't talking to you, but it's absolutely unrelated to what they previously said about, if we don't talk to you, it means we've given up on you. What kind of message is that sending, kind of thing? I will say, again, I really appreciate you all for giving me such good examples and your, even if it's unintended participation here, because or at a 7 a.m. class. So this makes me feel a lot better about myself, even if you guys are, you know, barely struggling to wake up in time kind of thing. So thank you again for that. Have any of you ever had any experiences where a player openly defied a team rule or a team policy? And while you're thinking on that, just side note, I hope I don't offend any of you by saying you guys. I know I say that a lot from the Midwest. So growing up, that's what we referred to any group of people was you guys. So Claire and Ananda, I really do hope I don't offend you by saying that. I try to do a lot better with it. When I worked out in Sun City as a rehab manager, and I would say that, it would get very, like, people would get super offended because when you're talking about like the senior population and you say you guys, that's like, you know, you might as well have just, you know, stuck your middle finger up at them kind of thing. So I try to say more of the time, most of the time, you all or you folks, that kind of thing. But I do catch myself slipping a lot. But yeah, anytime, can you guys think of any time in your lives when a player openly defied a coach?
Usually when it gets to that, it's usually like the player is just done with the organization. They usually like quit that day or something, and they say, "Screw this, I'm out of here." But I can't really think of one where after the fact the player was like still there hanging around.
Yeah, the only real instances I can think of are really from my year in Texas. Um, in the fall, we had a freshman who was going to be a redshirt. We had a rule that said you can only have a goatee, essentially, like whatever you could fit on your goatee, that's what you can have. You can have your sideburns down to your earlobes, and that's it. Everything else had to be clean shaven. Like this would get a talking to kind of thing. Like I wouldn't get in trouble, but I would be told, hey, you need to shave that. We had a freshman come in with a full-on freaking chin strap. Like it was probably like the day after the coach said it too. And we were doing, it was with our weightlifting day. So whatever, 6 a.m. weightlifting kind of thing. And so coach made us not weightlift and we ran for an hour doing like sprints and stuff like that. And the kid didn't do anything. Like he was, you know, had to sit on the sidelines and watch everyone run kind of thing, which, you know, always makes everyone like you even more. But then what was even worse was, like Elijah said, he quit the next day. And we all still got punished by saying it was no facial hair for the rest of the fall. Now, granted, I've never really been big on facial hair. I mean, I used to like say, you know, grow a playoff beard or whatever, but I don't know. I don't really care for it. My face gets too itchy when I have too much facial hair. But you know, some of the guys, like one of my roommates had a goatee for, like, he was a senior and he said he had that since like his sophomore year in high school. And it was so hilarious when he had to shave it off because, you know, he's got like you get a pretty tan complexion, you know, in southern Texas. And he's got this big, like, looks like a big white, you know, just face here. And he also had like a really big scar across his chin, which was kind of gnarly. But yeah, seeing him like that was pretty funny. But at the same time, you know, something like that where, you know, what if he was like insecure about that and that's why he grew facial hair and now you're kind of forcing that to come out? you see like you can open up a bunch of problems with it. But team policy is team policy. The only time I've ever done that, done something like that, was I think it was my sophomore year in college. I was drinking before, like the day before a game, when I was told I wasn't playing. So the rule was you can't drink a day before a game. Well, I was told I wasn't playing, so whatever, I'm not playing, so that's the same as not having a game, right? And then lo and behold, next day, oh, hey, Swoboda, you're starting today. Awesome. So on top of that, I didn't bring my spikes, and we traveled, 2 hours away. I wear a size 15 shoe. Not a whole lot of players in the team got a size 15 that I can borrow. So squeezing into a pair of size 12s was a really, really fun day, as it's snowing in, the middle of March at Lake Erie kind of thing. And then what was even worse, just the kicker to it all, was that there's like a whole group of us pitchers who weren't supposed to pitch that ended up having to pitch. One of the other guys in the pitching staff, ironically the guy that let me borrow his spikes, told on us afterward that we were all drinking the day before. We all get, suspended and punished, and he got to be one of the weekend starters the next week because of it. So, like, really cool move, dude. Needless to say, he was not really a welcomed kind of person on the team after that, at least with the pitching staff. All right, the last thing I want to talk about with communication is this aspect here on communication with teachers and administrators, because this is kind of who I am. Obviously, I'm a teacher. At my other school, I am the faculty athletics representative. And what that means is that I have to certify everyone's eligibility. So your compliance officer will will ensure that you're eligible. The faculty athletics representative certifies that eligibility. So you typically have 3 main administrators in athletics. You have an athletics director, you have a compliance officer, and you have a faculty athletics representative. The AD, is obviously the overseer of everything. So their name has to be attached to everything. The compliance officer makes sure that you are staying compliant with the rules. The faculty athletics representative checks that work essentially and makes sure that what they're told about this player is actually true. And without me, it doesn't matter if you're completely eligible. If I really wanted to be vindictive, I could just not sign off. I cannot certify your eligibility, and you wouldn't be eligible. I mean, I would get most likely fired, whatever, but I could really screw with someone if I wanted to. And, this is the first time I've had this kind of, power over people. No, but so one of the big things that I'm doing, or that I have to do at the start of every term, is I have to personally interview every single transfer student that's incoming to that semester. And this semester is different because the spring didn't count as a semester for athletics because of COVID. So spring 20 didn't count. Anyone that transferred into our school for spring 20 or fall 20, I have to treat them all as a new transfer student. So I have to interview all of them. And one thing that our coaches are good at is recruiting. Like Kelly Stinnett is our baseball coach, and he had a 12-year Major League Baseball career, played for the Diamondbacks, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Indians, the Yankees. I mean, he played for freaking everybody. But he has brought in around 40 transfer students as recruits this year. And I have to meet with every one of them to certify their eligibility, pretty much make sure that, hey, you're telling me the truth of where you've been, where you played before. And it's exhausting. We'll tell you, it is exhausting to do this. But when you're a player communicating with me in that role, the expectations I have are that you are going to, first off, be honest, because if you aren't, you're going to lose eligibility. You can't lie to me because the NCAA is going to find out, kind of thing. And that you respect my time. So these meetings, depending on how many schools they've been to, the athletes have been to in the past, they take roundabout 10 to 30 minutes. If I schedule you for a 30-minute block and you don't show up, like no call, no show, that kind of thing, what does that say to me about you?
Maybe that you're lazy and don't value other people's time.
Yeah, that whole bit, that's pretty good description there. I've had one basketball player who signed, like I had one of those Calendly things where, you have your calendar and you send out a link, someone clicks on it, they can pick a time on your calendar to schedule themselves for a meeting with you. So I sent that out to all the coaches. They sent it out to all their players. Everything fills up. For the most part, everything's going well. And this one basketball player signs up for a time. It was not this past Friday, like it was 2 weeks ago today. Signs up for a time for last Monday. So Monday not last Monday, that was Labor Day. No, it was Tuesday the 8th. Or was it? No. Monday the 31st. Sorry, it was 2 weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago, he signs up. So on Friday the 28th, he signs up of August for the Monday the 31st of August. I text him in the morning to get kind of clarification on his, if he's a transfer student or not. And he said, yeah, I am. And I just didn't get my transcripts in yet to the current school. So that's why I might not be showing up as having everything there. Okay, whatever. His time is at like 1:30. At 1:35, I'm still waiting for him. I send him a text like, hey, are you going to show up? He's like, oh, I got a job interview I'm going to. And it was like, well, you could have told me about that, kind of thing, because I'm sitting here waiting on you. And it's kind of hard for me to start doing like other work when I have, a couple minutes, kind of thing. And he goes, oh, sorry, man, I just found out about this yesterday. Okay, so you found out about it on Sunday, but you signed up on Friday for this meeting. And then his next response was, or after I told him, like, look, I texted you this morning even. And he goes, oh, I didn't know that was you. Like, so why are you talking to somebody about your transcripts and eligibility and not know who they are? Like, you just tell, like, what's your social security number? Can I have that real quick? And maybe your bank account information, because I'm pretty sure you'd give that to me too. And then what was hilarious, his coach makes him come see me on that Wednesday, and he doesn't show up. And then he sends me an email on Thursday saying, oh, he thought he was meeting with me that day. And he missed the time that he would have been there if it was Thursday. So like he was supposed to be there Wednesday at like 2:00. On Thursday, like 4, he sends me an email saying, oh, sorry, I missed our 2:00 today. So he even missed the incorrect time he thought he was supposed to be there. And now that's, now we're on our third try at this. At this point, I'm refusing to meet with him unless he meets with his coach and me at the same time. Do you think that is a justifiable action on my part? Amanda, you're shaking your head. Why? Or I should say nodding.
Because he's been kind of like unreliable and untrustworthy so far. So just having his coach there might make him want to actually be there, because maybe he doesn't think this is a really important sort of meeting.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree with you completely there. I will tell you, a lot of those students in the way that these meetings were conveyed to the students by like the ADs or AD and our whatever assistant AD was not done that well. So many of these students aren't getting the understanding that if they don't meet with me, they're automatically ineligible. Because if I can't certify your eligibility, there's no you're kind of eligible or you're temporarily eligible. There's no such thing as that with the NCAA or the NAIA. It's you are or you aren't. If you aren't, you can't are, So if I can't certify their eligibility, they're automatically ineligible. And I don't think a lot of them are really getting that. And if you're ineligible, it means you can practice, but you can't scrimmage, you can't play a game. If you were ineligible and you even played in a scrimmage, you would automatically lose a year of eligibility as a penalty. Plus, you would get charged a year of eligibility on top of that for playing in the year. So you can lose 2 years of eligibility just by playing in one scrimmage if you're ineligible. So if you're ineligible, or even if you're suspended from like say school or something, you can play or you can practice all you want. But if you play against anyone who isn't from your school, you've just pretty much opened up a big old can of worms for yourself. So while I don't expect to have, as an administrator, the most intimate relationships with the players, I expect to have this kind of mutual respect where we have open, honest communication. If you haven't noticed yet, you can really break down this whole communication chapter into being open and honest. That's pretty much how it all goes. Now, on the other hand, communicating as a teacher. For the most part, I don't communicate a whole lot with teachers with coaches or players well, really not coaches, as a teacher. I definitely communicate a lot with players as a teacher, but with coaches, I don't do that a whole lot. Now, my office is in the middle of all of the athletics department. So, I mean, all the coaches are around me. I talk to them at least, say how you're doing pretty much daily, but I don't really sit down with them a whole lot to talk about players. Usually it's me reaching out to them, not them reaching out to me. GCU is really good about having, like, say, I forget who the guy is that does it, but you'll have somebody send out your travel rosters to every student's classes to say, okay, this student's going to be traveling with the team for these days, missing these classes or whatever. And usually you get like a week or two advance notice, which is really nice. One of the things that I haven't yet experienced, and I really, really hope I don't, is getting essentially confronted by a coach and or a player about elevating their grade to maintain eligibility. And I'm sure you can all inherently, understand the problems you would experience with that. And I know at GCU that they have a very staunch policy against, like, say, extra credit and things like that. But when you get into those kinds of situations where you are essentially kind of begging a teacher to give you a better grade so you can play, you've done a whole lot of things wrong up to that point. You don't just say, I've never experienced a student fail my class, like any of my classes, that have actually tried. If someone shows up to class and actually just completes their work, I think the lowest grade I've ever given is like a C to a student that's actually done everything. And really that's kind of an exception, not the norm. The norm is, you know, B's and A's for everyone that tries. So whenever I hear students like that'll come to me about their grade, it's usually always they're usually always the ones that haven't done their work, and then they want somehow a way to make it up. You know, I had someone in the spring in kinesiology whom I gave an extension on their midterm paper. And that was like week like 7, 8, something like that. They didn't turn it in until week 14. And when I went back and looked at my emails, I saw that I had only said, get it in as soon as you can. I didn't give them an absolute date, so I had to accept it. Just kind of on my own, you know, dumb technicality there. But when you're looking at communicating with teachers as both a student and as an athlete, what do you think is most important about that? So even just take you all as students, ignore that if you've ever played sports before. When you talk to a teacher, what's your end game? Like why are you talking to a teacher?
To build a relationship.
Okay, it's definitely a good reason.
Usually to make sure we're on the same page, because with that relationship, most of the time it's one-sided throughout the semester. So it's mostly the teacher talking to the student. So if the student has like problems or something comes up, they need to make sure they communicate that to the teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge point there as well. I put in all of my syllabi that, you know, if you ever have any problems, call, text, email, you know, I can't help you if I don't know that you're having any problems, kind of thing. And one of the big pedagogical issues that we're seeing a shift in with teaching as a whole is doing a lot of these kind of prophylactic encounters with students, because many students just don't know how to or aren't comfortable with speaking to a teacher when they have any kind of issue. You know, it can be something as mundane as, you know, I don't know, I have to do something during this day. Can I get an extension on a paper? Or it can be as serious as, you know, I've been in a major car accident, I'm in the hospital, kind of thing. I need, you know, an incomplete for my class. And getting students to communicate with me, or just even with teachers as a whole, can sometimes be a really challenging thing to do. So now think of it from the perspective of, you know, what if I need to get my grade improved? When do you usually talk to a teacher about improving your grade? I mean, I know none of you do, but theoretically, when would you do that?
After class or by email?
But like when in the overall semester?
Towards the end when you realize your grade's bad?
Yeah, usually. You don't usually get the students that come and say, hey, I want to know how to best succeed in this class because I want a good grade. No, it's, I'm not doing well. How do I improve my grade? Well, you have 100 points left, so you can raise your 35% average to a 45. So if you get 100 on that, it's very hard to go back and redo things. But that's also why I try to say, you know, if you are struggling, especially like after the first quiz exam, that kind of thing, which none of you should be in this class, honestly. I mean, you really shouldn't. But in any class in general, having that early, open, honest communication is the best way to do it, because you still have time for things to change. If you're trying to change the very end, it almost comes off as being condescending, because you've had this whole semester to approach me or to, figure out a plan of how you can improve, and you've waited until the day before finals start, kind of thing. Not a good look. I don't know how the rest of your instructors are with anything like that, but I'm willing to work with anyone for any reason. I'm just all about making sure you have that open communication with me. I don't care if you tell me you need an extension on something because you just didn't do it. As long as you just tell me, if you're willing to take ownership of it, I'm willing to help work with you there. So you see how the relationship with your administrators and with your teachers, both from just a regular student perspective and from a student athlete perspective, can be so critical in really the grand scheme of things. I would encourage you all to at least know who your administrators are and what they do. That way you at least know something about them. It's not like would be talking to a stranger, essentially. So something just to kind of keep in the back of your mind there. All right, so that's everything I wanted to touch on with communication. Do you guys have any questions on that? All right, and I want to finish up today with a discussion here on scorekeeping. So this here is what a page in a scorebook would look like. And let me actually kind of just blow this up a little bit. Yeah, that's probably the best I'm going to get out of it. Okay. So, Claire and Ananda, have you seen something like this before? Ananda, you have. Claire, you haven't. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So again, this is how you keep score in baseball, or softball for that matter. You notice how you have these thicker lines here, and these ones here are thinner. For every thick line, this is one section for one player. So for my player, I'm going to put their name here. The number is their actual number on their uniform. And these are all my starting players. Typically, I'm going to have 9 players listed here. If you have a designated hitter or maybe an extra hitter, you would have more than that. But we're going to stick to the basic 9 that we have. Underneath the player is where you would put a substitute. So if Elijah was going to substitute in, I would put his name underneath the name of the person he was substituting for. With me so far? Simple, right? The inning here indicates what inning a substitute came into the game. There's 2 ways that you do this. If, again, I put Elijah here, I would write, let's say he came in the 5th inning. I also will indicate that by using a solid line at the inning he came in. This now indicates that everything from here back was name hitting. Everything from here out is Elijah. Okay, so I'm going to use that solid line to draw in where, or at the inning he came in. Oh, and I should also tell you that you will be tested on this. So this will be part of your first exam, just so you know.
Wouldn't that line go after the 4th inning?
Oh, sorry, you're right. Yeah, if he came in 5th inning, so he would come in there. So you want to use that line to precede whatever inning he comes in. So if he enters the 5th inning, he's in the game at the 5th inning, your line is immediately before that. Thanks for catching that, Nick. Your position. This is the number that corresponds to the position you play. Now, Claire, with volleyball, when you have, say, a formation, does everyone have like essentially a position number, or is it just based on like location? How does that work?
We have 1 through 6.
Okay, exact same thing here. So this should be relatively easy to translate for you. Your positions are 1 through 9. 1 is your pitcher, 2 is your catcher, 3 is your first baseman, 4 is your second baseman, 5, third base, 6 is your shortstop, 7 is left field, 8 is center field, 9 is right field. If you have a DH or an EH, a DH is a designated hitter. That means that is just somebody that will hit for someone else, typically like the pitcher. You would just write DH. That's a D. If you had an extra hitter, which you really don't see too often in college, but it does happen a bit in, like, say, summer ball or even like high school levels and below, you just write EH. And these all go in this position column. An extra hitter just means that's just another hitter. That's it. A DH means that they are hitting specifically for someone. It is possible to technically have a DH for any position. I actually saw this happen in softball at my college in Ohio. The catcher on the team, on the softball team, was like one of the best defensive catchers like ever. But I swear to God, she could not hit the broadside of a barn with a bat, kind of thing. And she actually got DH'd for, which was, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but that's kind of a little bit embarrassing if you're a position player and you get DH'd for. That shows that the coach would rather have a pitcher hit. And pitchers historically, no offense, Nick, but you know this is true, pitchers historically are not the best hitters. That's why you don't see in Major League Baseball pitchers hitting, unless it's the National League, which they, the starting pitcher hits. But there's really no pitchers that hit. You have, what's his name from the Angels? What the heck's his name? The Japanese guy.
Ohtani.
There you go. Yeah, he's both a pitcher and a hitter. So he'll actually DH for himself, and he'll be in the DH position when he doesn't pitch. And he's a very rare exception of a two-way player in professional baseball. Very, very few examples of that happen. I mean, there hasn't been a regular pitcher hitter. Oh my, since I think around like the 1980s or 90s. Like, it's been a long time since pitchers were hitting. Like, even like one example of it. But anyway, neither here nor there. So again, remembering 1 pitcher, 2 catcher, 3 first, 4 second, 5 third, 6 shortstop, 7 left field, 8 center field, 9 right field. So we got that. Change your position there, Nick, sorry. All right, so Claire, what position is name here?
The pitcher.
All right, and what position is Elijah?
The shortstop.
Perfect. All right, so we got that. Now we're ready to actually keep score. When you're keeping score, you notice how this here is a miniature field kind of thing. There's several ways to do it. I'm going to show you the most streamlined way to how to do this. Every one of your possible like hitting outcomes is already listed here for you. In some score books, you won't see this. You'll just be none of this would be here, and you have to actually write it in yourself. But all those are the possible outcomes for a batter getting on base or hitting the ball in some manner. So what you would do is, if any of these happened, this is a home run, triple, double, single, a sacrifice hit, a hit by pitch, and a walk or a base on balls. All you would do is circle the appropriate one. And that'll tell you what happened there. Every time a player touches a base, that has to be accounted for in the scorebook. So Claire, let's say that you hit a single. What I'm going to do is I'm going to circle 1B. So 1B means one base. And I'm going to draw a line from home to first, because that shows where you are right now. Okay? Now, this box here, this is your balls and strikes. You have 4 balls to a walk, 3 strikes, and you're out. After every pitch, you will mark one of these boxes to indicate what the pitch result was. Was it a ball or a strike, right? You only have, say, 3 boxes for a ball, because every time you circle an outcome, that indicates another pitch was thrown. So hence why you only have 3 balls and 2 strikes, because you can only have up to that many. If you were keeping track of someone's pitch count, because you can, like, say, hit a foul ball with 2 strikes and you still get to keep going, one of the things you would do is put a dot next to this. That would indicate that you had a foul ball. Usually that's not something that you necessarily have to do for, say, a scorebook, but you would do that if you were keeping a pitching chart, especially. So again, this is your balls, this is your strikes. So now Ananda gets up, and when I announce a count, I'm announcing balls and then strikes. So if you hear that there is a 2 and 1 count, 2 and 1, that is 2 balls and 1 strike. If it's a 3 and 0 count, 3 balls, no strikes. So balls are listed first, strikes are listed second. So Ananda gets up, and let's say that she has a 1 and 2 count. which of these boxes am I going to mark off? So Ananda, you have a 1 and 2 count. Which of these am I marking off?
1 for the ball and 2 strikes.
So which ones are those?
The 2 top ones and 1 of the bottom ones.
Yes, because the 2 top ones are strikes and the bottom 3 are balls. So if I have a 1 and 2 count, or a 1 ball and 2 strike count, I am marking off 1 ball and 2 strikes. All right, now let's say Ananda gets a double. I'm going to circle the 2B, or 2 bases, and I'm going to draw a line from here to here because she has gotten 2 bases. So she went from home to first and first to second. Now, what happened to Claire? Well, let's say Claire went to third base. So Claire, what would I do with you?
I don't know. I'm going to guess draw my line further.
Yep. I'm going to draw your line because you're at first base right now, but you got to third base. So I draw a line to second and a line to third. And there you are. Now, Nick gets up, and let's say that Nick gets out. So we haven't covered yet how to get out. Whenever a ball is hit in play, you will write down every person who touches that ball. So if you ever get in a rundown, it can be really, really tricky because if, say, the ball is thrown between players several times, you have to write down every single person that touches it, and that gets just way too complicated there. But let's say that Nick has a ground out. What I will do is I will write down the 2 players that touch it. So if he has a ground out to the second baseman, he would be getting a 4 for the second baseman, who then throws it to the first baseman for the out, 4-3. So anytime you have a ground out, you need to have at least 2 numbers on there. Now there's one exception to it. I'll cover that in a second here. So when someone touches the ball, you write their number down. When they throw the ball, you put a dash, because this dash represents a throw. And then again, someone touches the ball, you write their number down. You with me here? The numbers you write down are the positions. So 4 means second base, 3 means first base. The second baseman with that dash means I threw it, or the second baseman threw it to the first baseman. And Nick was out at first. When you get an out, you put an out in this section here. So this open area there, and you write the out number and circle it. So Nick was the first out. I circle that. That is 1 out. Now, Elijah gets up, and let's say he flies out to center field. Whenever you hit a ball in the air and it is caught in the air, you indicate that the ball was hit in the air, and you indicate who caught that ball. So if Elijah flies out to center field, I'm going to put F for a fly out, and I'm going to put 8 for the center fielder, because the center fielder caught the ball. And then I put a 2 here in a circle, because that is the second out of the inning. Now, what happens though if Claire were to tag up from third and score on Elijah's flyout?
It would be a sacrifice.
It would be a sacrifice. A sacrifice, so you would see that SH, you also write it out as sac. A sacrifice means that I have given up my at-bat to either advance the runners or score a runner. And you do this in two ways. You have a sacrifice fly, is where you would hit the ball in the air and you are out. But a runner scores. That's the only way you get a sacrifice fly. You can have a sacrifice bunt if you just bunt the ball and it advances the runners. They don't have to score, they just have to advance to another base. So you are essentially giving yourself up to better help the team. What then happens there is, if that happened, I would circle this HS and I would put sac 8. Now, whenever you have a sacrifice fly, and that's indicated by having only one number there, I am going to then have Claire score, because I have to have someone score on a sacrifice fly. When you score a run, you will color in the full diamond. That means you scored. Okay? Another thing that'll happen is, if you're like keeping all your stats, you would write here RBI. And RBI stands for runs batted in. Side note, there's no such thing as RBIs. That is an incorrect term. RBI by itself is plural, so it stands for runs batted in. You can't have runs batted ins. So you have 1 RBI, you have 500 RBI. Whenever you say RBIs, it is incorrect. I'm not so worried about you keeping track of the RBI right now. So, basic premise there. Again, when you have a ground out, you use the dash to indicate a throw. Whenever somebody touches a ball, you are going to write their number down, because that's going to tell you that they touched it. You put outs in this bottom corner in a circle. Balls and strikes you'll put here. You will circle any hit that happens, and anytime you touch a base, you have to indicate where you're at on the base path by coloring a line to that. That's the basic premise of scorekeeping there. Now, it's a lot of the other nuanced stuff that makes it a little bit more difficult. So now, let's say we have just Claire on first base again. So Claire got a single, she's on first base. Now, Claire, you try to steal second, and you get thrown out. If the catcher throws you out, so you're trying to steal, and you get out at second base, so you don't make it to second base, what I do is I draw a line halfway to second base, and I put a stop marker on it, or I put another line there, an intersecting line like that, or I guess a perpendicular line. That indicates that you were going to second base and you didn't make it. You only do this. If you see this, that means the person got out. You don't do that for anything else other than the runner is out. If you were out because you were caught stealing, you would put a CS, caught stealing. Have you heard the term of being picked off? So what a pitcher can do is if you are leading off the base, so you're on first base, you're leading off the base, meaning you are off of the base to get a shorter distance. The pitcher can throw the ball to the first baseman who can then tag you out. Picking off a player or a runner is a colloquial term. It's not an actual statistic in baseball. Anytime you are out on the base path, it's not the result of the ball being hit or the ball being, say, well, actually, yeah, if it's just not the result of a ball being hit, you are caught stealing. So even if Nick, as our pitcher, threw over to Elijah, our first baseman, who tagged you out on a pickoff move, it would still count as a caught stealing. So whenever you are out by yourself, so out without the hitter hitting the ball, it's a caught stealing. Now, what you can do if you want to is, and this gets a little bit more, say, nuanced here. So you've hit this single. What I can also do is I can indicate where you hit that ball. So let's say you hit the ball to right field. I can draw a dotted line to right field saying that's where you hit it. You don't need to remember how to do that, but that is something that you may see from time to time. So things you should remember initially here. Balls and strikes go in the balls and strikes bin there. Outs go in a circle here. You draw a solid line for wherever the batter ends up. You draw a halfway line with a perpendicular marker when the batter is, or when the runner is out. But you will only do that if they are out between first and second, second and third, or third and home. You don't do this if they're out at first. Okay? If they're out at first, you just don't put a marker on there because they never reached first base. And then for a ground out, you want to make sure you always put that you have whomever touched the ball first. The dash means they threw the ball, and whoever touched the ball second. Let's say you had a double play. So we got a single here, and then here someone hits into a double play. Let's say they hit a ground ball to the shortstop, who threw it to the second baseman, who threw it to the first baseman. What numbers do I put for that? So shortstop gets the ball first, throws to the second baseman, who throws to the first baseman. So what number is my shortstop?
6.
6. What number is my second baseman?
I think 4.
Yep. And what number is my first baseman?
3.
3. Perfect. So the shortstop fielded the ball first, threw the ball to the second baseman, who threw the ball to the first baseman. 6, 4, 3, which is a double play. Again, you write down the number of every person who touched the ball. Well, on a double play, you get 2 outs, hence the whole double play. What I'll do here is I will take this runner and they will go halfway and get marked out there. And they will get the 1 out here. And this 6, 4, 3 will be my second out there. I don't want to confuse you too much, but there are other ways to do that. You can put 6-4 here and just 4-3 here, but for the sake of really consistency, when we do double plays, you want to write the entire, or even a triple play for that matter, you would want to write the entire sequence on the person who hit the ball. So on the batter. Does that make sense? Okay. We talk about flyouts here. If I get a flyout, it is F and then the number of the player who caught the ball. And that can be anyone. So whomever catches it, F, and then the player's name, or player's position who caught it. If I have a line drive or a line out, it's the exact same thing, except I use an L. So F means fly out, L means line drive or a line out. I'm not going to ask you to know the differences between a fly out and say like a pop out. So what you should know is that if you see the terms pop out, so pop or fly, use the term or use the letter F to designate. If you see line out, you use L. If it's a foul out, same thing, just use the F. So those are all my flyouts. Anything in the air, I'm either writing an F or an L. Okay? Again, anything on the ground. If I hit any ball on the ground, and on the ground means the ball has touched the ground at least once, you write player's number who fields it first, and a dash where when they throw it, the player's number who catches it, and you can continue going as however long that lasts. So I say with like a rundown, if say, Claire, you got caught trying to steal second base and you kept running back and forth between the bases to try to get away from the fielders, every time they throw a ball trying to get you out, you have to add that onto your list there. So you can have this number go indefinitely. The last person, the last number that you have here is the person who catches the ball and makes the out. The first number is the first person to touch the ball. A dash means you threw it. Now, let's say you've made the third out of an inning. And I have 5-3 here. What does 5-3 mean?
Third base threw the ball to first base.
Yes, that is a ground out to the third baseman who threw to the first baseman. Now, I have to indicate that the inning is over because 3 outs equals the inning's over. To do that, I use a diagonal line right here. This tells me that my inning is over. And now I know that the next inning, I'm going to start off with this batter. Each of these here are your inning markers. So you keep you're actually writing or keeping score in a scorebook the same way you would write Mandarin Chinese, is you write it top to bottom, right to left. So I will keep score for everyone who's up in the first inning in this column. When that inning ends, so we make that third out, I draw this line here, and that signals that it's time to move over to the second inning, so that when the next batter starts, he is going to start, here. Does that make sense? Now, what happens if all 9 of your batters bat in the first inning and you're still hitting? What do you do then? So if all 9 of us have hit, skip a few, and this is 9. All 9 of our batters have hit, and they're all hitting. Every one of them, just singles around the board. Now, I have to go back to the top because my number 1 hitter is now hitting again, but I'm still in the first inning. Well, I'm out of spaces in the first inning to keep score. It's one of the best things to happen for the team. It's one of the worst things to happen for a scorekeeper. I cross out the number 2 and I put a number 1 here. This indicates that I'm still in the first inning. That's why, partly why you have 10, 11, 12 here, but it's also for going into extra innings. And then I would continue keeping score on this side until I got my 3rd out. And then I'll go over here. The next inning, I will cross out the 3 and I will put a 2 to indicate that that's the 2nd inning. And I'll have to manually do that for every single one of these from there on out. So I say it sucks to be a scorekeeper when that happens. Great if you're on the team because that means the team is doing something really well. Remember that you draw in or you color in the diamond whenever you have a runner score. And really, that is the basic premise of scorekeeping. So what we're going to do on Wednesday is we are going to be watching some games and we are going to keep score here. So this will be the first kind of more interactive thing we're going to do. I know that I gave you a whole, 15-minute overview on how to keep a scorebook. And if you've never seen a scorebook before, I'm sure that you've already got this skill mastered by now. But we will make sure to drill this in you until you get there. So Elijah, Nick, and Nanda, hopefully this is a bit of review for you. But don't worry, Claire, this is something that you will not understand for at least the first couple times you do it. That's why we're going to do it a lot. So we'll be spending a few weeks at least reviewing this kind of stuff, and we're going to integrate this into how we start doing actual, like, say, training with the players, how we do, like, say, situational awareness and different coaching strategy during the game. So we'll keep coming back to it. It's not something, like I said, I have no doubts you are not going to know virtually anything about this right now. What you should take away right now is, first off, is this basic thing here, is this here. This is what you should be able to remember right now. You should be able to remember the number being the number on their uniform, the player being the player name, the position being their position number, and then inning means what inning they were substituted into the game. That's what you should remember right now. And I guess you should probably also remember, this is balls and strikes. But even still, as long as you remember this, that's where I want you to be at least at right now. All right, other than the scorekeeping, what questions do you all have right now? All right. Well, that's everything new I had for you here today. Like I said, on Wednesday, we will get into the more of the scorekeeping by watching games and seeing how this actually happens. But until then, make sure you get your reflection essay in by Sunday, and then I will see you all back here on Wednesday.